Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am BorderWise and welcome back to From the Depths. And welcome back to my PC gaming computer which I play From the Depths on. It is back from the shop. They were taking a long time because I always have awful timing when I'm going to them, because I always catch them when they're really busy. School's out and all the little kids want custom gaming PCs, so they were working flat out, which is why it took them a long time to do anything. But anyway, this is a video I've been meaning to do for a little while now, ever since a fascinating conversation I had with clever, helpful people on Discord. Yes, I am on Discord. I lurk mostly, but sometimes I talk. But in any case, it's to do with using poles as armor. In particular, three things about them. Their use as basically kinetic blocks, as in blocks that, due to the angles and slopes on them, they take reduced kinetic damage. Like poles, like slopes, like wedges, stuff like that, and being able to essentially function as a free volume air gap in stopping heat in hash and stuff like that. So, I must confess that I have been a naughty boy and possibly misleading people a little bit regarding the usefulness of this. So that's why this is an apology video of sorts, an apology video, because I'm not out to misinform people. But also, the people who kept telling me that poles were completely useless and terrible and should never be used were very slightly wrong. I am more wrong than they were, but there was just a tiny little detail that resulted in different results. So, we'll talk about that in a second. So, it's to do with testing. Whenever I test armor or poles, I do so at a distance roughly like so. So if we have, let's go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So, about 18 meters or so, just over a dozen meters, and here I have an APS, and it is currently loaded with, let's see, it's currently loaded with heat shells, and whenever I tested poles like this, it worked perfectly well at stopping heat and hash, because we're going to be talking about them first. So, as you can see here, unless From the Depths decides to prove me wrong. So what happened there was, the heat shell went in, and actually, let's do that again, but I forgot that there is a beautiful little, so record projectile explosion effects, and let's do this again, see if it happens again. So, what happened there? So here we got... that's where the shell impacted, that is where the heat charge exploded, and here is where the spalling, or the heat shards, sprayed out, and they were stopped by this beam right here, which took a fair amount of damage. It's only about 20% health now, because this is a reasonably chunky heat shell, 500 millimeters, and it's got 3 HE charges behind the head, but it stopped it, so that works just fine. And for hash, you kind of get a similar thing, except not really, because hash is really unpredictable. So let us swap this over to our squash head, and then we refill the APS shells, and let's see what happens. It always sprays out in weird ways. So, right there. Nope. Stop it. Okay, cool. So you can see what happened there is, like, the shell went here, the thump happened, and then the shells, the spalling, rather, sprayed out willy-nilly. Some of them actually got kind of close to hitting the wood beams here, which are kind of just... Oh, some of them actually did. But yeah, so it still stopped it. It was stopped at the first layer. It spalled out in these gaps here. And that is a lot better than what can happen instead if you don't use any kind of gap block, so to speak. What happens is something like this. Really should have been using that as the control, but I didn't, so there you go. I love testing armor. I don't really. So that is what happens if you just use stacked beams, by the way. That's what happens when hash doesn't hit an air gap. Or rather, if the air gap it hits is just before your squishy bits, which is no good, it hurts a lot. So, that's all fine, really. So, also, let's do... What was I doing? Let's do that. And also, just so people are aware, I'm going to do something like this. Actually, nope. control first. I'm going to swap this over to a rather grunty kinetic shell. So let's go here, APS shell. So that's this thing right here. And it's at 500 millimeters, so it's not amazing. It's just under 10,000 kinetic damage, 35.5 armor pierce, so it's not going to do full damage to this. It's probably not even going to go through through that beam, but you never know. So let us do this now. Test that. Watch the damage number on the top right. 5.71 thousand kinetic damage. 5.71. Everyone remember that number, especially me. 5.71. 5.71. And over here. 5.71. 5.71. 5.71. 5.57. But poles have less health, so that's why it went through. Boy. Should really test that again with double stacking, but that wasn't the best test. Alright, let's try that again. Let's try that again. Let's draw that again. I can actually do that. Let us do... Now, we'll move on. Okay, so those little tests I just did, just with kinetic damage, ignoring the fact that that's a really powerful shell, and just walked straight through it because of the beam health. And with heat and heshes, that poles actually do okay. They're not as good as slopes, I did acknowledge that, but I still liked using poles because they're, like, you know, they're nice. I thought, more on this later, that they had nice even kinetic reduction all the way around. 360 degrees around the pole when oriented vertically, and also you don't have to worry about which way they're pointing, which is great, which makes it better for broadsiders, or I thought, because broadsiders don't always have like perfectly good angles, and tend not to control their angle as well as something like a frontsider. This is where the small differences in testing can really, really make a difference, because I tested at about anything between about a dozen to several tens of meters with my APS guns, or my crams, and what other people were doing was something like this. They were testing at point-blank range about 1 meter away from the whole thing, so let's go here, let's put some extra squishy, and let's spawn in a charge shell again, and let's refill that. And now, whoop, let's do this. Yep, let's do that, and let's test, and it should do. Yep, there we go. So, that was a spectacular failure on the part of the poles to stop that heat round at point blank, and this is why, at least from the conversation I was having on Discord, this is why people think that poles are completely useless and they don't stop heat and hesh at all. It's because they test at point-blank range, which I guess makes sense because it means you don't need as big a fortress, you can just point a gun point-blank, and it's not a bad way to test because it means that this is about as accurate as the shell gets, it doesn't deviate from its fired path at all, and so on and so forth. But this is why people think they're bad, and they're kind of right. I didn't do this, and that's why I thought people were, you know, just talking crap and were just, you know, repeating something they heard once and then accepting it as fact. But no, people have tested this, and now I've tested this, and I've done it in front of you. So, yeah, so it turns out that poles do make continuous little lines here. So let's zoom in really closely. That, essentially, that tiny pixel right there, counts, basically that's not an air gap. So from the depths is actually amazing in the way that it can consider those little points touching. It's no longer a gap. And apparently, that's not just with poles, it's with slopes as well. It's like if you orientate poles, like, where is it? Like this, or like this, for instance, it's the same thing right at the top there. So that incredibly thin sliver right there is not considered an air gap because the blocks are touching, which just shows you how it kind of weirdly advanced the physics in From the Depths are, because it means that there is an incredibly tiny chance that if a heat shell hits exactly along that line, that it will get through. Or so I'm told. And let's actually test that right now. We can just do it like so, with 2-meter poles, actually. It needs to be... Oh, this is going to be very hard to... How on earth are we going to do this? Actually, I think I know how to do this. Let's see if that does it. Let's see if that does the trick. Where's the damage debugging? There it is. Let's see. Okay, so we didn't quite manage it, but yeah, that is it's a very, very, very tiny thing. I don't know how to test that. Probably requires pistons and spin blocks and stuff like that. But yeah, point blank range, poles don't do the trick, and they don't do it with Hesh either. Well, Hesh is way more unpredictable. Hesh is annoying in the fact that it kind of just sprays and gets everywhere. So let's go test that Hesh, test that Hesh, test that Hesh, test that Hesh. Thump. Wait a minute. There was no thump. I did not clear the barrels. Let's go here. Refill APS shells. That's Hesh now. Let's do that. And let's try that again, baby. There we go. So that still stopped it, because Hesh doesn't care for your logic and doesn't care for your sensibilities, and it will just spray willy-nilly wherever it likes. So, alright, keep in mind, it's those two poles that were most heavily damaged. Let's do that again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again, baby. And now it got through. What? Well, wait, no. I didn't repair them. That's why. That's why, I think. Wait, let's do that again. Let's do it again. Hesh is weird. And now it did. It all spawned on that one pole. So Hesh is a tremendous pain in the ass to test and protect against. I guess the only thing that really works is putting nice air gaps with a spool liner in the places you really want, and just really hope it doesn't hit you otherwise. So that's a pain in the butt. So on to kinetic damage, though. So here is a thing that I literally just experimented with, and it is actually fascinating. So let's get rid of this, and let us put a pole on a spin block here. Let's go here, and like so. Actually, let's put a beam there for the control, and let us swap this out for the sabot head, the very strong sabot head that I think will tear straight through this. And let's see here, beam. Actually, yeah, let us shrink this by that, and let's not do that. Get rid of that. This is going to be a little funky. Alright, let's not do that. Let's do this instead, so it stays accurate. And 250 millimeters. The new stats is like so. Let's go here, 250. So 3000 KD, still the same armor pierce. And so we should get decent damage numbers. And that's on a spin block. It doesn't matter too much. It behaves the same way. So 1.82 kinetic damage, and here. .8. So here's the thing, like, poles do take reduced kinetic damage, but it's by a very small amount, really. It's like, they take something like 10, 15, some... I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's considerably less. Those of you who like math can do that. So if we go here and turn this 45 degrees, the interesting bit is, let's just see here, you're at 62% health, so let's repair you. So what was it, 1.8? 1.8, it's still 1.8, but now, change it to something like that, a 15-degree angle. What does that do? Different number? 1.82, which is the same, I believe, as what the beam was happening. And the reason for that is, if you zoom way in at the pole, you'll notice it's not actually a complete circle. It's basically a whole bunch of flat bits like so. So if it hits directly, hit directly on these flat bits right here, there's basically no damage reduction because it's not a slope. So I was completely wrong when I said, and I've been saying this a lot, that it has even 360 degrees of kinetic reduction, because it doesn't. What it actually does have is lots of very, like, lots of, what the hell, how do you describe this? I'm not good at math and geometry. What it has is a whole bunch of little flat surfaces at varying angles to each other, so it is pretty likely that it will have some kinetic reduction, but it's not that likely. It can still get hit flat and take maximum KD, which is no good. It's not foolproof. And just to add insult to injury, a metal beam at the same angle probably will take less damage. What's it? 1.78. So beams which are angled outperform poles in kinetic damage reduction. So poles really aren't that great. So I was a bit of a silly billy for using them. So is there any advantages to poles? Kind of, sort of, but not really. So we're going to do some more tests now, just to show you kind of what actually works well with armor. So we're going to start off with a control of a whole bunch of slopes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've got our honking big sabot round now. Let's see here. Barrel length needed isn't very big, so it's all good. And check the numbers. So numbers are pretty good. In fact, I'm going to swap that out for metal, so we get a better idea of what is happening. Let's go here. So that's all metal now, considerably weaker. Let's see what happens. It goes almost all the way through. So that last little block is at 70% health. Because armor stacking all the way through, decent amount of health, it's actually not that bad. It's just a heat shell would go straight through this, and that's no bueno. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Damn it. I wanted 6 layers. Alright, so we got to do that test again. I'm doing very well today. Alright, so now, what do we got? We got 75% health over there. Armor stacking for the win, that last little bit there. So now, let us compare that with every 2 layers you stick a pole, or you fill the innards of this with poles. Let's see here. Now that we don't have that armor stacking in the middle, not doing so well. So now that second to last beam is at 21% health, because the poles didn't do a very good job at stopping it. Now let's compare that again with something like this. So this, now we're using metal slopes, and these slopes are best of both worlds actually. They have got the backing, they've got armor stacking, and they've got nice kinetic reduction because that's a pretty steep angle. And I do find that slopes orientated like this do work actually better than like other kinds of slopes. It works better than slopes orientated this way, because this is essentially 4 meters thick but not much health. So your armor ends up being really thick but not having much health per meter, if that makes sense. Same thing with wedges. Wedges undoubtedly are much better if you just have a very narrow angle, or just not a very wide space to fill. Like, see the front of the singularity and just how ridiculously difficult it is to get through the front of it. What the hell is that? Ah, that is a mobile game that's trying to talk to me. Go away. Let's test this. Let's see how far this gets. doing better than the poles, but actually worse than the beams. So what are we finding out here? We're finding out that really what your armor is made of is more important than, like, what kinds of beams you're using to deal with it, because, this is, see, I gotta be real with you guys, armor is one of my least favorite subjects in From the Depths, or at very least it's my least favorite to talk about. Playing with it is great, explaining it and understanding it, it's my worst nightmare. I've got PTSD from the armor tutorials I've done and the responses that people have had to it. Okay, so, what are the remaining advantages of poles? Well, they still do have a little bit of kinetic resistance, so, like, slightly better than beams from certain angles, friggin' ambulance helicopter. They do have more health than slopes, so, the health of a 4-meter slope is 840, and the health of a metal beam is over 1300, so they do have more health, which is very useful for kinetic resistance. It's just that poles don't bother with armor stacking, or they don't have really, they don't benefit from it. So, one advantage of poles is that they are easy to place. You don't have to worry about their orientation, because their orientation is equally good, bad all around. So, if I do something like this, like, if I arrange my slopes like this, that's bad, that's a whoopsie. If it's like this, that's bad, that's a whoopsie. But poles, it really doesn't matter. So this is Lazy Man's armor, which is the actual reason I've been using them so long, because it's very simple. You don't really have to worry about which way they're pointing so long as they're vertical. They'll do a reasonable job, if not a good one. So they do that. Are they going to get through? They are not, but that is a very unhappy metal beam back there. So, incidentally, one thing you really don't want to do, and I'm just going to repair this, is something I've been doing in a few of my more recent builds is something, well, it's something like this. So, let's go here. You just got a whole massive poles in the middle here. This is a bad idea. You probably shouldn't do this. So, really, the armor orientation, if you're going to use poles, is you're going to alternate stacked layers of metal and poles, something like that. So 2 beams, 1 pole layer, and if you're doing slopes, you can do something like this. Let's see if that does the trick. Will that stop the beast? It actually does, because actually, well, no, it didn't, because it wasn't as thick. Let's do that again, but with a slope on the front. Let's see here. Let's do that. I'm just testing stuff now. Alright, so similar results. That last beam is very unhappy indeed. Actually, let's do this again, and just do this again. Very unhappy pole. So I guess the real moral of the story is that 500mm guns hurt no matter what. Okay, so that's basically too long didn't read. Is that poles are not good. Only use them if you're feeling lazy, and do bear in mind that the closer you are, the less likely they are to defend you against a heat shell coming through. And I just want to finish on a little disclaimer. Well, first I want to say that poles aren't so bad. You can see that, like, against this shell type, like, solid beams, a mixture of beams and poles and a mixture of beams and slopes, you actually get kind of similar results if aimed flat like this. You probably get much different results, and the beams would probably do way better if they were angled. So, yeah, it's funny. It's like, at the end of the day, it's just make sure you have some kind of air gap in your armor. And don't, like, you know, just remember that armor stacking only works in 2 layers, and every 2 layers just do something different, be it an air gap or a pole or a slope or a wedge or just something. But I would like to finish on a little disclaimer regarding learning things from the depths, in particular how I learn things from the comments, because I love you guys. I seriously do. Life would be really hard in From the Depths without you. So, but here is what I'm going to say, and I'm not mad and I'm not even disappointed, it's just so we're all on the same page. If I persist in doing something that you, the viewer, know is incorrect, it's probably because people aren't explaining it properly, because I like to think I'm an intelligent person, but let's face it, we all derp sometimes. And communication is where this kind of learning tends to fall flat. So, in the case of polls here, people kept telling me polls are bad, don't use them. And that's pretty much minimum paraphrasing with what they were saying. They didn't explain how they knew that, is what I'm trying to guess. So, people say like, oh, polls are bad, they don't stop heat. And then I went off and did tests, like the ones you saw at the beginning of this video, where they do. And so I was very confused, thinking, well, I don't know why people are saying that. And then I carried on with me live spamming polls willy-nilly, and presumably some people were pulling their hair out by the roots saying, BorderWise, what is wrong with you? And it turns out, like, the point which wasn't communicated was how it was being tested. So, like test both point blank and at range, I guess, is the ultimate lesson of this. And you do have to remember that when you type your comment, saying, BorderWise, this is what you're doing wrong, and this is how you should do things differently, do remember that if I don't do what you say, please don't take it personally, because I have to be careful. This goes for every YouTuber. I can't believe every comment, because a lot of times, they contradict each other. And a lot of them are actually wrong, so... boy. Awkward when you tell off your audience, except I'm not really telling you off. I am sharing behind-the-scenes stuff with you, so... Let's fire this one more time, why not? Let's fire it... Oh, last thing I want to show you is just how useless just a huge mass of poles is, because I'm pretty sure this is gonna go straight through, and if it doesn't, we might have learned something. Yep, that goes straight through. So, certainly don't do this. This is dumb. Actually, hold on. I thought the video was supposed to have ended. I guess I lied. Yeah, I think this is about as on par with doing this, which is also not smart. Don't do this either. Bang? Yep, that's also bad. Don't do that. Alright, so we've learned things, and the police are coming to take me away. So, I hope you accept this A-pole-ogy. I will never get tired of that pun. And, good to have my gaming PC back. Good to be back properly. And thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon and YouTube membership if you like. It really helps. And there's fun perks in it for you. Thank you to all my current supporters, and I will see you next time in From the Depths. Farewell.